I stared at the paper in front of me, my hands shaking. "Why is your signature on this withdrawal?" the bank manager asked. I looked at the signature line. That wasn't my handwriting. My sister leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Don't start drama, Brittany." But I couldn't stop staring. Someone had forged my name, and I knew exactly who it was. My name is Brittany Collins, and I'm 36 years old. I work as a nonprofit program coordinator. Nothing fancy. I help low-income families find housing and legal resources. I've always been the calm one in my family, the fixer, the one who smooths things over when everyone else is fighting. My older sister, Rachel, was always the favorite, the bold one, the one they always praised for being fearless and confident. When our grandmother passed away 2 years ago, she left behind a $750,000 trust fund for both of us, equal beneficiaries. It was clear and simple. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. I read everything before I signed it. Every clause, every amendment, every single word. I kept digital copies of every trust document in a secure folder on my laptop. Rachel rolled her eyes whenever I asked questions about the paperwork. "You don't trust me?" she'd joke, like I was being paranoid. But I didn't trust people with money. I trusted the paperwork. So when the bank manager showed me a withdrawal form with my forged signature on it, I didn't panic. I felt something colder settle in my chest, because this wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. This was federal fraud. If someone in your family ever crossed a line you never thought they would, subscribe. Have you ever trusted someone with money and regretted it? Tell me below. I read every comment. Click hype and let's get into what happened next. I visited the bank after receiving an automated notification about a large trust withdrawal. I hadn't requested anything. When I walked into the branch, the bank manager looked uncomfortable. He showed me the documentation. $180,000 had already been transferred out of the trust account. I looked at the signature line. My name was there, but the handwriting was wrong. The loops were too wide. The slant was different. It was a poor forgery. Rachel sat next to me in the office, acting like nothing was wrong. "It was pre-approved family restructuring," she said casually. I turned to her. "You don't get to restructure my inheritance without my permission." Her face hardened. "Grandma would have wanted me to manage it. You're too cautious with money. You just let it sit there." Other people in the bank lobby were starting to look at us. Rachel raised her voice. "You're embarrassing yourself. You don't even understand how trusts work." I stayed calm. I asked the bank manager for copies of all transaction logs. That's when the compliance officer walked in. The tone in the room shifted immediately. He mentioned federal reporting requirements for suspicious signatures. Rachel's confidence faltered for just a second. "This doesn't need to go that far," she said quickly. I looked at her. "You already took it that far." Then the compliance officer told me something that made my blood run cold. There were additional pending transfers scheduled within the next few days, nearly $300,000 more. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Rachel started calling relatives the next day, claiming I was misunderstanding the paperwork. My uncle called me that afternoon. "Why can't you just talk this out like adults?" he asked. I took a breath. "Forgery isn't a misunderstanding." He hung up. A few hours later, Rachel texted me, "If you escalate this, the whole family suffers. Legal fees will drain the trust entirely. Is that what you want?" I didn't respond, but I noticed something. Rachel was suddenly posting photos online. New designer handbags, a weekend trip to Miami, expensive dinners. I took screenshots of everything. A week later, Rachel offered me a deal. She called me late at night. "I'll return some of it. Let's just forget the rest. We can move on." I spoke clearly. "Return all of it or we involve authorities." She laughed. "You wouldn't dare. You're not that person." I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I just hung up. The next morning, I forwarded all the documentation to a federal financial crimes hotline. Days later, the bank flagged the account for internal fraud review. Rachel grew confident again. She told our cousin, These things never go anywhere. Banks just cover themselves. I stayed quiet, but I had already taken the next step. What Rachel didn't know was that 3 years ago, I helped a client in my nonprofit job navigate a housing fraud case. That client's daughter later became an assistant U.S. attorney specializing in financial crimes. We had stayed loosely in touch over the years. When I saw the forged signature, I didn't just file a bank complaint. I contacted him directly with full documentation. I had a plan they never saw coming, I told myself. He reviewed everything carefully. He advised me on preserving digital trails and told me not to confront Rachel further. He explained that trust fund misappropriation involving forged signatures can cross into federal jurisdiction, especially when interstate banking systems are used. I quietly compiled everything: bank alerts, email confirmations, IP login records showing when and where the transfers were initiated, text messages from Rachel that implied intent. Rachel thought family pressure would silence me. She didn't realize I had access to someone who understood exactly how serious this was. The assistant U.S. attorney reviewed my documentation over the next 2 weeks. He called me one evening. If this checks out, this isn't civil, it's criminal. I felt the weight of that word, criminal. My sister could go to prison. Meanwhile, Rachel grew reckless. She attempted another transfer using updated digital authorization she had somehow created. The bank's fraud department escalated the case immediately. Rachel called me, her voice tight. "Stop being dramatic, I'm fixing this." I replied calmly, "No, the system is." A federal inquiry began quietly. Rachel received formal notice requesting documentation for all questioned withdrawals. She assumed it was routine bank procedure. I said nothing to the extended family. The tension built as investigators subpoenaed banking metadata. Rachel started calling me repeatedly, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. One night, she finally asked directly, "Did you report me?" I answered once. I reported the fraud. 3 weeks later, Rachel received a direct call from a federal prosecutor's office requesting her presence for questioning. She showed up at my apartment the next morning, furious. "What did you do?" she demanded. I stood in my doorway, steady. "I protected my name." Her voice cracked. "You're ruining my life over paperwork." I didn't raise my voice. "You forged my identity for $750,000. She left without another word. Later, during formal questioning, prosecutors presented digital logging trails matching Rachel's devices. They had copies of the forged signature overlays that had been analyzed by experts. They showed evidence of structured transfers designed to avoid federal reporting thresholds. Rachel's confidence collapsed in that room. She tried to claim she had authorization from me. The prosecutor looked directly at her. "We have evidence contradicting that claim." The trust assets were temporarily frozen pending the investigation. Rachel called me that night, her voice shaking. "Please call them off. I'll give it all back." I said softly, "I can't. You chose this." The power had completely shifted. The sister who mocked my caution now faced a federal fraud scrutiny. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed, knowing my name was no longer being used against her. After months of investigation, Rachel negotiated a plea agreement. She avoided prison, but she faced restitution and federal penalties that would follow her for years. The trust fund was restored under strict oversight. Family relationships fractured. Some relatives blamed me for going too far. They said I should have handled it privately. I accepted the distance. I moved forward financially secure, but emotionally changed. I updated the trust with stronger protections and independent co-trustees. I no longer felt guilty for setting boundaries. She forged my name to control my future. In the end, the only thing she signed was her own consequences. If a family member ever betrayed you financially, you know how deep that cut goes. Have you ever trusted someone with money and regretted it? Tell me below. I read every comment. Click hype and let's get into what happened next. Subscribe if you believe accountability matters, even in family. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Standing up for yourself is tough. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of our community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.